Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen live or on air. Yeah, you can listen live, like in your car. Does your car still have a radio, or a radio in your kitchen? Do you still have that? Or do you podcast? Any of those ways. That's how long we've been delivering Herbally Yours to you. And you can listen on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, or our own nccradio.org, or our award-winning WHPC app. Download that, and you can follow WHPC 24 hours a day. And Herbally Yours continues to bring you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have on board as our guest Saad Harti, who is the CEO and founder of Legacy Healthcare. And that is a company that aims to develop botanical drugs for autoimmune, inflammatory, and age-related conditions that are safe enough for chronic use, especially by fragile populations such as children and the elderly. And Saad was started in the financial field, but then moved to pioneering contraceptive access programs in developing countries, and is now working with the power of plants in pharmaceuticals. So thank you so much for joining us today, Saad.
Thanks for hosting me on.
And I just want to shout out now, and we'll tell people several times during the show, that if they're interested in more information, visit legacyhealthcare.ch. What does .ch mean? That must mean it goes to a different country. Where does that go?
Correct. That's Switzerland. It stands for Confédération Helvétique, which means Switzerland. Really, I think only the Swiss people know what CH means.
Well, I do work.
That's where we are.
I noticed that because I work a lot with BioStrath. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but BioStrath has been a nutritional supplement that comes out of Switzerland. So I always noticed their website also is with a CH. So thank you so much for joining us from so far away. Let's talk about this specialty of yours. When you talk about the power of plants in pharmaceuticals, and you're talking about a botanical drug. What is a botanical drug?
Sure. I think you're absolutely right to start by this. That's the definition, and I think there is a lot of misconception. So I'll try to clarify this. A botanical drug is a drug, and more precisely, a prescription drug. So just like any other drug, whether it's made from a chemical agent or cell therapy or you name it, a botanical drug is approved and has to be approved by the US FDA or the European Medicine Agency, for instance, when it comes to Europe, for treating a given disease. The regulation for turning full plant extracts, and I'm going to go into more detail on that, into prescription drug is very new. It dates back to 2004, the very first regulation. So we're just shy of 20 years into this regulation. So plants have been used for ages to make drugs. However, the way they have been used so far was to isolate one single molecule from the plant, which was supposed to be the one having a therapeutic effect, and synthesizing it, meaning turning it into a chemical agent. So plants have been used as a start for making chemical drugs. What botanical drugs are is turning the full plant, meaning removing nothing, adding nothing, into a prescription drug. So that's quite new.
So I have a question about that. That's a good one. Let's give our audiences, because they probably will recognize some of the therapeutic modalities you're talking about, where there's an active constituent that was originally found in a plant. It is then isolated. Sometimes it's also somewhat changed so that it could be patented, and then it's used as a pharmaceutical. So what would be some examples of that?
So Taxol, which is coming from a plant, from a tree, has been used as a anti-cancer agent.
You're talking about Taxol, Taxol.
Exactly.
That's one that many
Taxol.
people might be familiar with, because women are often
Correct.
given that following cancer treatments.
Exactly. That's the reason why I'm mentioning this one. This drug has been around for probably 4 decades, and this is the perfect example of an active substance identified in a tree, isolated, synthesized, and turned into a chemical drug. But that's true that it has been harnessed from a plant.
That's a good example. Now, what you're talking about might be where they use the full plant extract. So I'm wondering, then, once they call that a pharmaceutical, can it still be sold as an over-the-counter herbal therapy?
So the regulation actually is very simple in the US. You are what you say you are, meaning that if you claim that you are treating a disease, you are a drug, because only drug can claim to treat a disease. So if you claim and you aim at that, you will be categorized as a drug, regardless of what you're made of, whether you're made of chemical agent or a full plant extract. If you stay within certain what we call allegations, like beauty, like better health, and you're not claiming to treat any disease, then you can be sold as a nutraceutical.
Well, that's very interesting.
Out of the counter. So, as a matter of fact, FDA is very straightforward and simple in that sense. You are what you claim you are. And if you're a drug, you have to prove you're a drug, meaning that you have to go through different stages to prove that your product is well manufactured. That's called CMNC, which stands for Chemical Manufacturing and Control. You have to show that your drug is safe, and you have to go through plenty of different tests, safety tests, toxicity tests, and more importantly, you have to go through clinical efficacy trials to demonstrate that your drug is actually efficient, treat the disease better than either a placebo or a control drug.
Yeah, so that's not an easy process. I would say that usually takes about 12 years and $12 million, something like that, to go through that entire process.
I validate the 12 years, but on the money front, unfortunately, this is way more than that, absolutely.
Way more. That might be a 20-year-old figure. You're right. But that was the estimate, and I would say that might be 20 years ago that was the estimate. So now, of course, things have become much more complicated. Doing a clinical trial is no easy matter. And so how would you do that? Now you're part of a company that you have created some of these full plant drugs, which I imagine have a pretty good efficacy and safety profile.
So the starting point of the company was to put patient safety as a start and have no compromise.
That's amazing right there, right? Because in chemical drugs, patient safety isn't, not so much the focus, I don't think, because the adverse effects are often very intense.
Absolutely. Now, when you use synthetic agents, the base principle, but that's the base principle for botanical drug as well, is something called the benefit risk, meaning that the risk associated to the drug, and that's essentially the toxicity, the side effects, should outweigh should be, how can I say that? Should be the benefit that you get from the drug should outweigh the risk that is associated to the drug. And that is a judgmental appreciation from health authorities. Just take any drug information, patient information leaflet. You can download them from internet, and you have a litany of side effects, unwanted effects from the drug, which by treating a disease is damaging otherwise healthy biological mechanism through its process of treating the disease. So that is the model that we know, which is to always have to make a certain arbitrage between the benefit you're getting from the drug and the risk you're taking with the drug. Knowing that you can do that with one drug, but as you start to pile up treatments, and that is the case for most people after a certain age, there is an exponential increase in the risk you're taking because those drugs that you're taking concomitantly start to have interactions and risks that you may not even be able to guess because of those interactions. But let's not put this into the wrong lens. Let's be clear, these drugs save life, makes people's life better, but they come with a cost, which is the associated risk. Now, if we said maybe we can, with this new regulation of using plants, we saw an opportunity to completely change the paradigm. So not all plants are safe. Some plants are more poisonous than many chemical substances.
This is true, and people forget that. They'll go on an herb walk and just start eating everything in the forest and wind up in the hospital.
Correct. And even edible plants can be toxic at certain doses. But let's agree, as a starting point, that we're developing drugs with edible plants, meaning plants which are known safe for human use. FDA classify those as grass, generally regarded as safe. And let's assume that the dose which is in there is at most equal to the daily intake that you will have in a normal diet. With this in mind, the likelihood that the regular intake of these drugs will trigger any toxicity is very slim. We can't say close to nil because
there's always individual sensitivities, right? People die of peanuts, hundreds every day. So you're saying the baseline is safe.
Exactly. Provided you're not allergic to those plants, the drug that you will be turning out of those plants will be extremely tolerated, and the risk of toxicity is very slim. So we said, okay, let's get there. And let's use this as our starting point. So let's not think first of what we're going to treat. Let's first think of we do no harm. We want to do no harm, but really do no harm. So that's, I would say it's almost philosophical. This is a starting point where we put the patient at the center. We do not start from science. We start from the patient. We do not want to hurt the patient, and we start from there. So I'll give you a few examples where health authority immediately endorsed this approach. For instance, because of the drug safety, so our drug is made out of 4 plants, the first ever drug made out of more than 1 plant. And we try with this drug to treat an autoimmune condition called alopecia areata.
So let's tell our audience, because you and I know what that means. But what is alopecia for just someone listening today?
So alopecia is an autoimmune condition. It means that at some point in time, for a reason we rarely know, the cells which are supposed to protect your body from pathogens, from external attacks, turn against your body, and they will harm and kill certain cells. In the case of alopecia areata, they kill the hair follicle cells, and people lose their hair in round or odd patches. So this is a disfiguring disease with extreme psychological toll. Other immune conditions attack different type of cells. Some attack the gut cells, and this triggers disease like Crohn's disease, different bowel diseases. Some attack the skin. It's called psoriasis, etc. So alopecia areata is an autoimmune condition, and these are some of the most difficult conditions to treat, because you need to put your immune function, which is supposed to protect you, under control, with the risk that by putting your immune system under surveillance or trying to shut it down, you expose your body to many other risks. You may have infections, which instead of being just mild and temporary, turn into wild infections, which can last for a while, even be deadly. So these are very complex diseases to treat, autoimmune inflammatory conditions. Typically, alopecia areata starts early in age, and it generally starts with few patches on your scalp. 2 drugs have been just recently approved for this treatment of this disease. They belong to a class of drug. It's small chemical entities called JAK inhibitors, and they're great drugs. They've been approved, but because of their toxicity profile, just for the record, they have what is called a black box on their labeling, which means that there is a warning from FDA on their extreme toxicity, potential extreme toxicity. They can lead to infection, to death, to malignancy. So we're talking of serious issues. Because of that benefit-risk profile, they have been restricted essentially to adult or young adults and the most severe cases only.
Because
the disease.
What you're describing is the fact that other regular pharmaceutical drugs that are used to sort of suppress the immune system, to downturn the autoimmune response, which you're discussing here in terms of alopecia, among many, have a lot of toxicity. So now we're moving towards something that you've been working on, which is a botanical drug that may have a similar action, but with a much lower rate of negative adverse effects.
Absolutely. So I think it's taking this as a good example, illustrating it by concrete example will speak more to people than a theoretical explanation. So typically, that's a disease where there is where 2 drugs have been recently approved. We're talking last year and this year, so it's very recent. And because of the risk of these drugs, health authorities have said your benefit must be great to outweigh the risk, and therefore we only grant you the authorization to treat very severe cases. And in reality, it's been used in only very severe cases. So somehow you need to wait until your patient had lost all his hair and the disease has progressed to a very advanced level before treating the patient, which in a sense is a little bit nonsense. Like waiting until your house is burned down to call the fireman. Say, no, you know what? Now try to put the fire down. Doesn't make any sense. But remember the logic of benefit risk, and also. This is a disease which can start early in age. And we know that by treating people early in their age, in childhood, you may have a better control over the disease. And these are chronic conditions, so they may come back again when you become an adult. So it's important to treat them early, or to try to control them early, which is not possible with the current drugs. Now, take our drug. Health authorities, they can read what this drug is composed of. We have extensive safety data. So they say, first, we would like you to start treating the patient early in their disease. Why? Because the risk being extremely low, you can start treating patient early. We don't need to wait for them to become very severe. That's one. Second, they said, please start in children, because if you control the disease in children, the prognosis, so the chance for the disease to be better controlled, is higher. That is, to my knowledge, the very first time the European Medicine Agency asks a company to start in children for a disease which also affects adults. It's never the case.
You're right.
With any drug, you start in adults. And when you prove it's safe, you try to check what dose works for kids, and you go in kids eventually. So that's the first time health authority do it differently.
So that's a very exciting. That's an exciting first. So let's talk about it. Does this have a name, and what herbs are involved in this botanical drug?
Sure. So the drug name is Coacilium.
How do you spell that?
So COACILLIUN. Coacilium. And this is an acronym of the 4 plants which the drug contains. So the 4 plants which the drug contains are all known safe for human use. and some of them are even consumed in regular diets. We have Allium cepa, we have citrus lemon, we have Paulina cupana, and cocoa. So those 4 plants, there is a whole discovery process, as you can imagine, to get to the point where we decide to invest all this money into the research of all these plants.
Right, not only the plants, the particular combination, the ratio of each to the other. There's a lot there.
Absolutely. From discovery, and even the process of discovery is new. Interestingly enough, it's a mix of what we call, what is called ethnopharmacology, meaning understanding how plants have been used so far, because we're not the first one to do that. Plants have been used for millennia to treat ailments. So there is a lot out there. But there is also new knowledge, all the biology of plants. We know now about plants a breadth of information on the chemical composition of plants' metabolite and which one could be of potential interest for therapeutic use. This is a huge knowledge. And on the other hand, we start to know a lot about diseases and what we call in diseases druggable target, meaning targets which are relevant to address and which could help treat the disease. Now, with our chemical agent, a single compound, you can hit only one target. It's, imagine, you can only shoot once at one target. Now, in a plant and in a combination of plants, you have multiple compounds, the majority of which will be useless, but you can't care less. These are extremely safe plants. You can get them, you can ingest them, you can rub them in your skin. It doesn't do any harm. But the advantage is, if you pick those plants, and this is what we did, for the 3, 4, 5, let's say 10 families of metabolites that you want to have, you have a drug which can have multiple effects. One drug, multiple effects. That's totally new versus one drug, one effect. That's one. Now, if you want to have with chemical agent multiple effects, that's very tricky because you can't combine too much molecules. And the ones who have multiple effects, there are not much out there, and they come with toxicities. The second part of the advantage of using those plants, again, considering the one which are safe for human use, is that you can use them long enough without potentially any harm, meaning that you can typically use them for chronic diseases where you need to expose patient for a certain period of time to the drug. Typically, that's the case of alopecia areata. It's a chronic condition. You need to treat patient for a while before seeing a result. And this is exactly what our drug has demonstrated. Clinical efficacy, superiority to placebo during the treatment period, a perfect safety. And what we've discovered, and this will be released very, very soon in a congress, in the European Academy of Dermatology Congress in Berlin in October, is that even though we stopped the treatment, the benefit of the drug has continued, which generally doesn't happen. When you stop a drug, you lose the benefit.
But yet we do see that sometimes with herbal therapies, because you might have retaught that autoimmune system, down-regulated its activity. Doesn't mean it won't come back again, but that's very, very interesting data.
Exactly. It's not a cure in any manner. These are diseases which come back in flares, but there is a certain period probably through which you can simply stop your treatment and get back to your normal life, which every person would love to do instead of taking a drug every day.
So to get this on the market, is it on the market already or you're still working on it?
No, we have filed this drug for approval with the European Medicine Agency. So if things go well, this drug could be approved somewhere mid next year in Europe. And we have started to dialogue with the US FDA to try to get this drug into the US market. That's going to take a little while, but we're working on it.
It's still very exciting,
it's going to be
very exciting research. I think it's a great move. and really exciting. And it's a whole new word that you're talking about, botanical drug, because in order to call this combination that you've been working on and doing the research, you have to go through the regular regimen of what it takes for a pharmaceutical to be on the market. And yet it has so much of a lower incidence of adverse effects, probably because you're using biocompatible molecules from the plant.
You summarized it perfectly well. This is exactly what we're doing.
Well, I think that's really exciting. And on your website at legacyhealthcare.ch, can people see more about this?
Absolutely. I mean, we explain what we do, how we do it, and why it matters. Very brief, but it goes to the point. What we're trying to do here at Legacy Healthcare is not to be a one-drug company. This first drug we hope to bring to market will be our proof of concept that turning full plant extract into drugs is an extremely relevant pathway, and it can be very rewarding for the one who do it. And our goal is to inspire more people to do that, is to inspire investors to put their money into botanical drugs, to inspire researchers to on plant biology to try to venture and to dare going out there in a world where botanical drugs have been merely in existence so far, but we want to change that. And we want to change it for us, for our kids, for the next generation, because people do prefer botanical drugs. We asked them through a poll, and that's what came out. The botanical drugs is the class of drugs which is in tune with where the world is going to. These are, I would call them the bio drugs in a bio world. So that's really it's not just a trend, it's a mega trend. It's happening. And I mean, I really encourage the pharma industry to embrace that. There is room for everyone. That's really the future, at least for chronic condition, and we believe the future for many diseases.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today on Herbally Yours. We've been speaking with Saad Harti, founder and CEO of Legacy Healthcare, which you can find at legacyhealthcare.ch. Really fascinating information. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in once again to Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen live online at nccradio.org, iHeartRadio, or any podcast venue of your choice. And for more information on today's guest, you can always look that up at where we said legacyhealthcare.ch. And we are produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. And for further information, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai. You can find me at naturalnurse.com. And we invite you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.